If you have target funds, it's very easy to.
I think that applied to 70 or 80 engineering jobs.
If you are trying to raise capital for sales and marketing,
if we do 10 LinkedIn outreaches, 2 of them respond to us, we get a call and we can convert on 50% of calls.
Please don't do crowdfunding at this stage. Wait a little bit, at least build. I would recommend at this stage, go try.
When you're a first-time founder, you don't have that back door.
Unless you have a super established sales and marketing engine. Sales and marketing is usually not a reason to raise.
We are back with another episode of the Do As I Say, Not As I Did podcast, a startup advice show where we answer the real questions about what's going on in your life and in your businesses. And if you have a question or you're trying to put out fires, and if you're in a startup, you 100% are trying to put out fires, send those through to podcast@joeldtrapani.com and we'll answer them on the show. This is the first in-studio recording, so we've got a special guest for a special recording style. But I'll jump to that. But first, I'm your host, Joel Trapani, and today I'm super excited to be joined by my friend Cate Diaz, the founder of Market Chemistry, where she connects innovative founders with their best match investors. Market Chemistry is built on the belief that the distinct ecosystem of each startup requires a comparably tailored set of investment partners. I did research. I didn't make these words up. That's why they actually sound good. Not all investment capital is equally beneficial, and that's why they focus their startup investor pairing efforts through the lens of relationship marketing for every kind of round imaginable, whether it's crowdfunding, angel, or VC. That's why I have a lot of questions I have no idea about today. But outside of this, and arguably more importantly, Cate is borderline obsessed with all kinds of racket sports. She's also the second best person in this room at Unstable Unicorns, and a surprisingly bad influence when it comes to shots. But in general, Cate is an absolute expert at getting any kind of investment round done. So thank you, Cate. Thank you for coming on today, or coming in today.
Thanks for having me. Also, I would challenge that Unstable Unicorns notion that you're
I guess we don't have time, and we're just going to have to take it from me. That's got all. But look, before we jump to the questions, can you tell me a little bit more about Market Chemistry? I took all of the wording off the internet, but I'd love you to describe it a bit more.
Yeah, so our focus is creating leverage through relationships for founders. And the way we do that is through 2 different phases with founders. Number 1 would be creating investor readiness materials. So that can be your typical pitch deck, or for people who are doing crowdfunding, also landing pages or pages on the crowdfunding site. Those are going to be like your messaging of what the raise is, why the business is investable, et cetera. And then the other part is actually connecting the founders to investors. And the reason that we build those relationships is because, I'm sure you know, but not all founders are coming in, building awesome things and having pre-existing relationships there. So there's lots of folks who are like really lost as to how they can connect with the people who are going to fund their business and bring them to the next level.
Yeah. I just feel like raising money is kind of counterintuitive to what I expected as a founder. So having someone actually coach me through it would have been so useful instead of making just tons of bad decisions as I went through. But the one thing that I think is special that you're mentioning is like the relationships. And I think raising, at least for like the first few rounds, is all relationships. Then as you go a bit further, it's mainly relationships, but some results as well. But like relationships are just so key, and it feels impossible to build them. So having someone that can help you build them, I think, is like a hack of some description, to just like skip a lot of steps, because I just had no idea where to start. Do you find that like when your founders come in, is that maybe where they struggle the most on that relationship front?
Yeah, I think there are 2 major areas. So the first one is like, who do I talk to? And then the second one is, what info am I sharing with them? So that's what the investment narrative piece can help with. That second part is, what do I share with them? And then also, I really recommend watching content that's meant for venture capitalists and angels, and reading books that's meant for venture capitalists and angels, so you can understand how those decisions are made. And then the actual like making the connection part is, you're just like lost in a sea of like people on the internet, and you don't know who is a good fit for you. You don't know how best to reach out to them. And that's really the core area that we focus on in terms of building the relationship, is getting from 0 to 1, which is making sure you can meet the right people and then start a conversation with them. You take it from there, but we want to make sure that you can start the conversation and on the right foot.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing at the beginning that I had no idea, which is who are the correct people, because you're just like, an investor's an investor. Yeah. They have money, they can help me, but 99% of investors are a terrible fit for you. So even just having someone be able to help you find them, which I had no idea where to find them, and then cull out most of them would be amazing. But before we just go into so much about that and tons of my own unsolicited advice, let's jump into the questions here. Actually, one piece of unsolicited advice. If you're listening to the podcast, you've already heard me say this about 1 billion times, but just read the book Fundraising by Ryan Breslow. Have you read that book actually? Mm-hmm. It's the fucking best book. You're like a professional fundraiser. What do you think of that book?
I like the book. I also would recommend an additional one, The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
I've never heard that recommended in the premise of fundraising.
Yeah, so Ben Horowitz actually spends part of the book talking about business building and the lessons he learned, but he also spends part of the book talking about investment in relation to his journey becoming an investor, but also in the businesses that he was trying to get investment for along the way.
That's interesting. I love that book, and I feel like it gets recommended a lot. But I'm glad to know that you like Fundraising by Ryan Breslow as well. It's 50 pages, so just read it. But all right, let's jump to the questions. So the first question, the first challenge today is called, why do people seem to be so offended by the idea of crowdfunding? In the 12 days since we've conceptualized our business idea and are offering equity to those who want to invest, we've been laughed at, called a Ponzi scheme, a scam, and apparently made people angry. I don't understand why people seem to be so offended by our startup. I think we're giving a fair and honestly great deal. We want to make people money, a lot of money. Can anyone let me know any insights on this and if you ran into similar issues? Thanks. From Personal Plan 4257.
Yeah, well, I hear this a lot also. So like, we work on crowdfunding deals all the time. And first of all, the equity crowdfunding is not that old. And even more than that, really, we didn't have the ability to raise the full $5 million, which is the top cap for a Reg CF, until a few years ago. So it's very new. And I think the perception from founders is that investors won't take them very seriously. And one of the core reasons is that they're concerned their cap table will look like a nightmare. There'll be like hundreds, if not thousands, of people that you have to answer to. And that's simply not true anymore, because most crowdfunding platforms will offer you an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, for your cap table. A lot of them will file it for you, where you can appoint someone to have the essentially voting power that everyone else underneath them inside the SPV, you don't really have to answer to them. You provide them investor updates, but it's not a big sloppy list on your cap table anymore. If you don't want it to be, there's lots of options out there. I think that's the main thing I see. The other thing is just it's a dated perception. I think it's modern funding, especially post-pandemic, is shifting, and I think blended rounds between crowdfunding, angels, and even VCs have started converging. And some of the early stage folks I see who are struggling to raise full rounds from venture capitalists right now, they're really seeing their success in taking creative approaches like blending. Hey, I funded half my round for my community, and it's under one line on my cap table. The person who is voting on behalf of that community, I trust heavily, and it's an angel who's invested before. And then the venture firm looks at that, takes it a bit more seriously than previously, and maybe they jump in and complete the round.
Yeah. It definitely, it does feel scary to me, like crowdfunding for a lot of reasons. It's not something I've ever done, which is why I wanted to ask you about it, because you've just seen it in way more than I have. I guess like a couple of things jump out of this from me. It's like, why are people offended by it? I think it's probably because it's so new. Like people are often scared by things that are new. I think that's probably like the easiest answer.
Yeah.
Also, with new stuff, people take advantage whenever they can. So there are horror stories out there, but I think there are more wins out there than there are horror stories. But horror stories carry further. But I think the reason, particularly that Personal Plan is having people getting pissed off, is because he's been doing the business for fucking 12 days or something like that, and he's trying to give away equity. It's just like, I would be scared of that. Like, no investor is going to invest in you after 12 days, and no, like, get your shit together. You haven't even been going for 2 weeks. Like, I think, I don't know, if you're already taking on a socially scared funding mechanic, like, build some credibility in what you're doing, I think, for one. But I guess one thing that you mentioned that I actually had never considered before is these blended rounds. And I'd always seen a blended round as like someone failed to do one or the other. But I kind of like that idea of, you've gone to your community of customers. So you've already got traction. You've got people who are using your platform that like you and believe in you enough to invest. Then you take, $100K or $1 million in from a market that like deeply understands your problem. And then you use that as kind of like the catalyst to go raise a round from VC. That seems fucking awesome. But I'd never had considered doing it like that before. That feels like the perfect way to do it. Do you see that being done more like those blended rounds, or more like straight crowdfunding, or more like what's the kind of mix that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I would say early stage companies are really seeing the struggle right now, especially like pre-seed through Series A. I think the needle has moved a lot in terms of what VCs are asking for, regardless of industry, in terms of traction. And being able to point at your community giving you capital in more than one way is an incredible form of traction. Yeah. So I'm seeing that absolutely rise in early stage companies.
Yeah. Okay, that's very cool. It's not something I've ever done. I think in a consumer platform, it makes so much sense as well.
Yeah. We do see some B2B businesses raising, but they usually have, with crowdfunding, what you want to have is like a sexy factor. Yeah. It's like, what is a retail investor going to be interested in? So it can be a consumer product, it can be a B2B product, but is it something that people are excited about? So if you have like a B2B AI product right now, that's still something that might generate a lot of interest with retail investors, because AI is a hot topic.
Yeah. Yeah, like I just think about in my own company, which is like enterprise SaaS, and I'm like, there's no way anyone would be retail investing in that. Like crowdfunding wouldn't work for us. Like I've had a question about crowdfunding before, and they were saying like crowdfunding versus angel versus VC, and I was bullish against crowdfunding, because I just didn't understand it, which is why I was keen to kind of get you on to try and make me understand it more. And like, I think crowdfunding, I still think fundamentally crowdfunding doesn't work for a lot of businesses, but I think there are definitely times where it makes a lot of sense. And if you can be in one of those kind of like, I still think like B2C is probably the more likely of them, like positions where you can raise, that would make sense. But if I come back to the question, so Personal Plan, you asked, why do people seem to be so offended by the idea of crowdfunding? I think if I summarize that, it's just like a super new financial instrument. And so people aren't familiar with it. So they're scared. And then they think they're getting ripped off because they don't understand something. I don't think there's been enough runs on the board yet for people to be very comfortable with crowdfunding. Like at least versus, Kickstarter board game creation and stuff like that, where it's like effectively a gamble. Which this still is at the end of the day, any kind of investment is gamble. The second thing is, I think because it's not understood, it doesn't feel like there's enough credibility in the financial instrument. So I think if you go into this too early in a crowdfunding mechanic, you're just asking people to have like blind faith in something that they have no understanding about from a financial instrument or a company instrument. I think generally this guy's getting way too much negative feedback because he's going out way too early. Like I wouldn't go to an angel after 12 days, and I wouldn't go to a VC after 12 days, and there's no way in hell I'm going to go out to thousands of people who are unsophisticated investors after 12 days. So I don't think you should raise until you have like something that's truly adding value to people. So I think that's the main reasons people are getting too much hate on the crowdfunding side of stuff. But anything I've missed there, you reckon?
No, I think that's a pretty good summary. I would also say that the deals that do well on crowdfunding platforms, whether it's white label or a marketplace, which are the two types of crowdfunding platforms, it's not usually folks that have had their business for like 12 days or launched 12 days ago, whatever the details were. And so that's kind of an anomaly, and he's an edge case, or she. And the reason that people do well on the platforms usually is because they have some sort of community to seed their deal with and put the offer in front of, like, do you want to invest? And this person, if I were to guess, they had some sort of personal network already, and so that reflects more on them than the business, which I will say, again, anomaly, but it does also happen sometimes in the venture space. Think of people who are like a multi-exit founder, for example, or maybe you have one notable exit, but you start up another venture, you have everyone who believed in you from the first venture. So
yeah, I think second-time founders are just so much more investable. And I'm a first-time founder, and I'm just like, 7 or 8 years in, and I'm like, why did anyone fund me? I had to learn so much in it. So being a second-time founder, I think on retail or institutional investment makes such a difference. But all right, we'll close that one out. So personal plan 4257, you've been advised. Get more traction. Also, just bonus advice there. All right, so let's move on. Second challenge here. This one is called raising pre-seed and feeling very low. So I've applied to over 40 pre-seed VCs and I've only heard back from 2. Both of which have been standard rejection emails. We are working on a B2B SaaS product and are onboarding our first customers currently. We don't actually need VC funding to sustain ourselves, but it would allow us to scale super quickly. We are first-time founders, I just commented on that, with no previous network or funding providers. I know it's a numbers game at this stage, but we've not even had the chance to speak with anyone and show them what we have. Our deck is pretty solid and we've reviewed this with others many times. Any suggestions? From Burger Snub.
Burger Snob. Well, first I would ask, how are you reaching out to these VCs? Are you just filling out forms online? Have you tried to look them up on LinkedIn and connect with them personally? The actual investors themselves, have you tried to create a relationship with them? If you have target funds, it's very easy to then reach out and try and form a relationship with them, whether over email or LinkedIn. Those are the 2 most popular channels. Yeah. I think just filling out forms online, it's kind of like applying to jobs. You need to get your way through via relationships or forming a relationship rather than just like slinging resumes. Yeah. So that would be the first piece of advice I would give them.
Slinging resumes is such a good way to describe it. And when I got my first ever job out of college, I was not sure whether I should say uni or college, but I feel like uni doesn't make sense in America. But I think I applied to 70 or 80 engineering jobs, all through the front door. Slinging resumes in. Dear to whom it may concern, like kind of vibes. And I heard back from no one, or if I heard back, it was a rejection, kind of in a similar situation. The only way I got a job was from a connection, from a relationship. And that was like, that learning there of getting a job just, I think, has translated and shaped how we've run my entire company, which is like, the human connection is so real. And I think, for Burger Snob, who's, I guess, like, there's a few things in this question which are awesome. Like, first of all, they're building something. I love that. Like, build something. Like, that's so awesome. Like, have a crack. And it's B2B. I personally prefer B2B. It feels so much easier than B2C because I've never been able to crack a B2C place, which I've tried. and you're starting to get customers, like that's awesome. I do think it still sounds pretty early to raise, but it sounds like you don't have to. And that's awesome. Like to be in a position where you don't have to raise, and it's a nice to have to scale. Like it feels like you've maybe set up something that's like truly like a good business. I would kind of like change my perspective if I was in your case, and I would stop being raising focused, and I would just go straight to building relationships and be like, I'm just going to go hard for 6 months building relationships. And there's this really common expression, which is like ask for advice and get money, ask for money and get advice. So just go out, stop slinging your deck into people's inboxes, and just start asking for coffees and asking for advice and going to meetups and just trying to meet as many people as you can. Like you said, your first time, that's hard. That's a hard place to be. That's the place I was in. It's hard when you don't have a good set of like networks, and just start building relationships. The single hack here, as I said at the top, is to read Ryan Breslow's fundraising book, because he goes into so much detail about how to read it. But exactly what you're saying, like I think LinkedIn is the ultimate hack. Like,
yeah. Also, I saw this on a recent Colin and Samir episode, so you might have seen it too. I know you watch that show.
I do love those guys.
Or
Come on.
Yeah, come on the podcast. So they had the writer of the book called The Third Door. Did you see that episode? So basically, you talked about walking in the front door. So like you already covered what the front door is. The back door is kind of like the VIP line. Like you already know the person. You can just like walk in. The person's like, oh yeah, you head on in. Yeah. And then the third way is essentially getting really good at cold messaging and connecting with people through cold messaging. So the episode's really worth a watch if you're trying to reach out to investors and do so while bootstrapping. For this particular person, I would also say I 100% agree with you. If the person really doesn't have to raise capital, that may also be another reason why people aren't looking their way at this point. And if you are trying to raise capital for sales and marketing, and that's your primary reason for raising, unless you have some sort of hyper established engine, what investors are going to be looking for in the early stages is, do you have the opportunity lined up, and my dollars would help you reach the opportunity immediately. Like that would be the best possible scenario above the traction you already have. So again, unless you have a super established sales and marketing engine, sales and marketing is usually not a reason to raise.
Yeah. That's a really good point. It's an answer. It's a perspective on the answer that I wouldn't have even gone into, but you've got to think about what investors get out of this as well. Like investors aren't there to fund your like fun time building a business. Like investors are here to make money back. Yeah. So I think, like onboarding your first customers, tipping money in, it actually isn't about scale. At that point, it's like, it's product market fit discovery kind of shit. So if I was in this same position, I would just go out, I'd get the customers, and I'd prove out a really repeatable engine, exactly what you're saying. Like work out, if we do 10 LinkedIn outreaches, 2 of them respond to us, we get a call, and we can convert on 50% of calls. And like understand exactly how you convert to a customer. What is the pathway here? Understand how much money you make back every time you get a customer on. And when you have that engine sorted out, that's when an investor's going to be like, oh, if I give you money, I'm going to get more money back. I can give my LPs more money back. Like, and then they're ticking a lot of boxes. And honestly, just the more traction you have, and especially today, like it's a fucking terrible time to raise money. Yeah. Like they just want like sure things. They want to see that you can make money repeatably and you know how to scale. And when you're a first time founder, you don't have that back door. So you need traction to like make them feel comfortable with it. So the last thing I say is like practical, tactical advice on building a network. 1, LinkedIn outreach. Just fucking do tons of it. Do 100 a week. There's a lot of investors in the world. Start sitting down and having coffees with them. 2nd is just start throwing events. Like every month, throw an event and just start bringing as many people as you can together. And that will like compound over time. And in 6 to 12 months, you will have like a crazy network. And I know for a fact it works because when I moved to Austin, I knew 0 people. And by the end of that, I knew probably like in the hundreds of investors here. Like I knew so many people, it was crazy. So just do tons of outreach, tons of coffees and tons of events, and you'll meet more than enough people. You build those relationships over time. And then when you have more repeatable engine and you're in a position where you can truly raise, the right people will be there for you. I guess maybe I'll try and wrap that up succinctly. So you've applied to 40 pre-seed VCs, you've only heard back from 2, and you're feeling low. First of all, I get it. It's raising money is fucking exhausting. It's like one of the worst parts of doing a business.
It's a second full-time job for the CEO.
Oh yeah, it's just bad generally, I think. But it's also normal, you know. I think everyone goes through that phase. Like you need, like when you're raising, you need to be in this like overinflated sense of delusion to kind of get that done. So like it makes sense that you feel low. Going out to 40 and hearing back 2 rejections, like that's super normal if you're just going to go down that path. So flip the script. Don't go out to raise money, go out to get advice, and eventually build strong enough relationships where you will be able to raise money because they're going to want to invest. Stop slinging resumes, stop slinging decks. I love that expression. Stop slinging decks. I'm going to get a shirt made like that. And start building real connection with people, and do that by just asking them for coffee, asking them for advice, and then hit up 100 people on LinkedIn a week and start throwing events. That's it. And then you will, if your company is able to raise, you will raise within 6 to 12 months after that. Guaranteed. Or come back to this show and give me 1 star. Anything missed there?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, let's move on to our last question. This last question is called crowdfunding outreach. I'm looking for advice, any advice on crowdfunding when you have no real community. I have a smasher of a business idea. Love that. This guy's got to be British. I've got a smasher of a business idea, but it's going to take funding probably in the realm of £1 million. There we go. They are British. I'm really wondering if anyone could share some effective techniques to outreach to people who would possibly be interested, and even from there, how to keep them updated and intrigued. The business is tech-based and will be B2B. Thanks for help in advance. From Boyo 1996. Well, this, honestly, I had forgotten what questions I'd put in here, but that's like a kind of a perfect for all the advice I gave in the previous question. But I love it from your perspective, because I think more about outreach from like building relationships for institutional investors. But how do you think about it for building the relationships for crowdfunding?
Okay, I'm actually going to backtrack a little bit. So this person is way too early stage to raise.
Yes.
So if you have a business idea, I understand that you want to go get funding for an idea because it's costly to build ideas. But with the retail investor community, they, despite being more open in some areas of VC sensitivities, they still have sensitivities with where am I going to put my dollars. And if you have absolutely zero for your business so far, that's a tough place to start, and that's a tough position to put your investor community in if you build one. Imagine you got investments. Can you justify having friends and family, which is your community that you'd be starting with, and then also potentially some strangers on the internet who put in each $100? Can you justify a valuation with them? Because you still have to value your company. Can you justify any of the info that you put down on the investment page, whether that's a landing page or it's on the platform? So I think that's a tough position to put an investor of any level or any amount in, where you just have an idea, unless this is like a multi-time founder and they have their team assembled or some sort of edge case like that. I would say, please don't do crowdfunding at this stage. Wait a little bit, at least build. I would recommend at this stage, go try and get a grant if you can. The U.S. government invests in idea stage businesses all the time. They invest up through like alpha or beta, basically, most commonly.
I 100% agree. I feel like I'm like one of, like, people must be like, fuck, this guy's such a negative dickhead. Like, because, and I get, like, people ask me all the time about like how to raise money, and like my answers are always, you probably can't raise right now, and you probably shouldn't raise right now. Like it's actually much harder to raise than you think, and there's just like there is this myth out there that just keeps perpetuating, which is like, oh, this company in America just raised off this idea, and then a year later they were worth $1 billion. Like that's all complete bullshit. Like 100% of the time, the only time people can ever raise off an idea is when they are second or third times founders that have had an exceptionally good outcome. So they've sold a business for $100 or $1 billion or something like that, and all the investors were like, holy shit, like that founder is exceptional, and I don't care what he does. Because your initial ideas suck. Like a smasher of a business idea, I guarantee is incorrect. But I get it. This is where I started. When I started with Vigo, my business at the beginning, first of all, the first version of it was an Uber for tutoring. You want to learn anything, come to my platform, guitar, math, rock climbing, baking, you can find a tutor for it. Sounded awesome. It's a terrible idea. The business mechanics behind it is so terrible. And we read all these stories about like people in the US being able to raise $1 million or $2 million. And I was like, cool. So we spent like 6 months before anything trying to raise and couldn't raise shit. And we're like, this is bullshit. But over time I learned like, it doesn't make sense. Investors again aren't there to fund your fun and your dream. Like they're there to make money. And so you need to have something to raise off. And 2024 is a hard time to raise money in any round size. And so the chances is that you cannot raise unless I think you're a second time or successful founder, or you have like a very novel proprietary technology that you figured out. Like you've got a patent because you were a PhD or something like that.
But they said they haven't built anything yet.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah.
So like the chances of that is like, and the fact that you're asking this means that we know you're a first time founder. So it's cool. I get it. But like, you just have to grind out for way longer than you think, like probably a couple of years before you could raise money, because you need to build something tiny, and then is that working? Prove out your assumptions, and then build it a little bit more and a little bit more. And you won't be able to pay anyone. You're going to have to find someone who can build it, or you're going to have to learn to build it yourself. And that's just the reality, whether it's crowdfunding or institutional VC investment or angel funds. Like I also would recommend don't go to your family. Like I have a friend that he just came out with an idea. He borrowed $600,000 from like his friends and family, which is like, it's cool that he was in a position that he could do that. But all that money got fucking tanked, and now he just feels like he owes his parents and family and friends $600K. Like, because the initial idea sucks all the time, like 100% of the time. So I don't know, like you need traction. You just need traction. That's it. Like,
yeah, one of the standards that we have for market chemistry, and this sounds like an insanely low standard, but it's obviously not, is we just ask one of many questions. But question number one is, do we think this business is investable?
Yeah.
And the answer in this situation would be no, because it's not yet a business.
yeah.
I mean, you don't even, unless I misunderstood, he or she, they don't even have like a business filing set up yet.
Yeah. So I guess like, I think like you definitely can't. But then if I come back to your initial question, I guess maybe a few things that jump into my mind here. Like, first thing is that you can't raise right now, and I'm sorry. The second thing is that I get it. This is what everyone wants to do. It's super normal to try and want to race at the beginning, but it's just close to impossible, and I wouldn't waste my time. The third thing is that the fact that you're thinking about outreach is correct, because you're going to want these relationships now. Like, I wish I had started reaching out to people right at the beginning. We didn't build the right relationship for a long time. So again, I would just go out, ask for advice, and eventually you'll get money. But if you go out asking for money now, you're going to get burnt. You're going to look like a silly founder. Like, you don't have a good business plan or exit strategy or product, or you don't know how much money it costs to acquire customers. Like, you need to learn so much of this as you go. So just start getting as many mentors as you can in the space, and start building relationships with as many investors in the space as you can. And you want to know how to keep them updated. So I would go out, again, reach out to 100 people a week on LinkedIn. It seems crazy, but like, if you get 5 people responding, that's a pretty good success rate. And 5 conversations a week. That's probably one of the most important things you can do in your business. start adding them to an email that you send out once a month or once a quarter about like, here's what we're up to. In a year's time when you've built something, or 2 years time when you've built something and you've got traction, these investors are going to be like, holy shit, you did something. Like, I'm fucking in, let's go. Like, you said you're going to do something and you did it, and you'll build that trust over time. So
yeah, and I do want to wrap this question imagining that this person does have a business that's ready to raise.
Yeah, good idea.
And give a little tip as to what they can do. So assuming they follow your advice, what you would actually do on LinkedIn without knowing who you're reaching out to yet, assuming that you haven't done research as to like what firms or individuals could invest in your business. Just pretend you're only on LinkedIn. What you would do is type in the search bar, and this is so simple, but it's really, it works. You type it in the search bar, say you have like a SaaS business. So you look up like SaaS investor, or you look up angel investor. You look up all related terms, and then you filter to not your first contacts, but your second connections. And the reason is those folks, you have at least one connection to every single one of them. Some of them you might know very closely. Those are places where you could ask for intros, or you can go and say, hey, I hung out with this person a couple of times, we're connected, I think you and I should connect too. And give them an actual reason why. Don't just make it like a vapid request.
That's a good point. Like, when I say reach out to 100 people a week on LinkedIn, I'm not saying just do like a connection request. I'm thinking like, do a tailored message. And that's a perfect example of like, hey, like, I saw you were connected with Cate. Like, I love Cate because of XYZ. And she said she knows you. Like, could we connect, and can I buy you coffee, or could we get on a call and can I ask you a few questions? Another tactic for cold outreach that I love is, someone told me that they don't just ask people to come for coffee because like that's a big commitment. So they ask them a specific question like, hey Cate, I saw you're an expert in funding. Like, I'm thinking about XYZ. What do you think? And like, you've got 300 characters, just ask one question. And that feels like an easier pill to swallow. Like, I hate like, hi there, I saw you're from Vigo Pty Ltd. Like, I think I've seen we're in the same industry. Like, I'm like, shut up.
Yeah.
Ignore.
Yeah, I think revealing your intentions is something that goes far with a lot of people, because there's a lot of automation on LinkedIn, and there's also a lot of EAs in people's accounts sending out just generic messaging, and you see the same messaging over and over. When we connect with investors on behalf of clients, we always start message one with like clear intentions. Like, hey, my company X is raising on this crowdfunding platform. Do you want to take a look at the deal?
See, I would never do that.
Yeah.
Like,
works for us.
Yeah, I guess like I'm not crowdfunded, so like I don't know, like it potentially different there, but I guess like I'm always opting for relationship first, and so like I'm like, cool, I know I just want to meet tons of investors, so I'll just reach out to like 100 investors and be like, I want your advice, and I genuinely like would go to people that I think could give me advice on stuff that I don't understand, and then after building a relationship, I'm like, if it's a right fit, then it might become into something. Whereas and the podcast is a big hack for me for meeting people as well. Like, hey, come on my podcast. Like I always go for advice first. I feel like when you lead, like I don't want to lie and be like, I'm only going to this person because like I want them to raise. Like that should be an important reason, but also like if you genuinely seek advice, you can learn, you can improve. People, I think, react better to that. I think I feel like so many people would be turned away by that, but
I mean, we always have really good outcomes from connecting with people, being clear about motives, especially investors, even venture capitalists. They are clear on what their job is. You are saving their firm money and doing research, looking for people that fit their thesis. So there are lots of people who are willing to answer. I think it depends on what you are doing at the time. if you are focused on just long-term building your network, your approach is correct.
Yeah.
If you are actively raising, I think that you should absolutely be clear about your intentions in connecting with investors. And it's not just, it doesn't stop there. Like, that's the connection. It's like, hey, I have something relevant for you. And then from there, you build their relationship by talking about their feedback, answering their questions, offering connections to them, accepting connections from them. So
I guess that makes sense. Like, I'm never really reaching out to people for like a moment in time thing. I'm raising right now and I want you involved. Like, my goal is to always make the relationships that I need for around like a year in advance, or at least 6 months in advance. And so I genuinely do want advice, and I want to build that relationship over time and get beers with people, margaritas with people, or whatever. I guess I've never been in that position where I'm like, I want to get a round done right now and I want to do cold outreach for a current round.
yeah.
So
you have the foresight to build those relationships, which makes it so you don't have to make an ask for a very long time.
yeah.
And so that is advantageous. When people come to market chemistry, it's often the case where like maybe we're helping them through some connections with existing audience or previous investors, but it's often the case where they're looking for fresh relationships. So
Sure.
you go in and you ask for the relationship, you ask for the feedback, you ask for the connections.
That I guess that makes sense. Yeah, like, because I do see it if I was raising around right now and I say, oh, I just want your advice, and then in the first conversation I'm just like, oh, I'm raising, do you want to be involved? Like, that's just like manipulative, and people would get pissed off with that. So cool. All right, well, let's wrap this one up here. So crowdfunding outreach to Boyo 1996. Essentially, unfortunately, your business is way too early to be fundable. So just focus on building relationships, but you won't be able to raise, my guess is, for like a year or two. You might blow me out of the water and I'd be so stoked for you, but like, I totally get it why you want to raise this early, because that's what everyone says is possible, but it's just not. And then second is that when you want to do outreach, like for a crowdfunding campaign, like my approach, wherever possible, go in as much kind of like advanced timing as you can, and meet someone 12 months or 6 months before if you can. Do tons of LinkedIn cold outreach, put them on an email newsletter, and build relationships over time, and throw events. But if you're looking to do a round right now and you're in a position where you can do a crowdfunding campaign, do tons of outreach again. You just need to do tons of cold outreach at the end of the day. Make sure they're customized, but also be very upfront about your intentions and tell them what you're doing. And if they're invested, they'll opt in. And if they're not interested, they're just going to opt out. And that's okay, because you can't force someone to invest in your business. Yeah, I think that's everything. Anything else there?
Nope.
All right. Well, Boyo 1996, you have been advised. You know my wife, Ree. She hates it when I say you've been advised. She's just like, that's not correct English. And I'm just like, it's my thing. And she's just like, your guests will think you're silly. And I'm just like, no, I like it. So,
Listen, I think we all need a little bit of silly in our podcast. That's not like a comedy podcast.
Exactly. And this is a comedy podcast.
I've watched too many super serious business podcasts.
Yeah.
And there's no humor. Sometimes there's no humanity.
Yeah. Well, you've all been advised, and we've been advised and validated by Cate right now. So last section of the show, which is plugs, which is my favorite section of the show. So tell me, Cate, what's going on? Anything you want to plug at the moment?
Not anything in particular, but I am open to people connecting with me on LinkedIn after the episode.
Yeah. Hit up Cate on LinkedIn. She does good posts. I really do love the stuff that Cate posts. Also, Cate just likes really interesting stuff on LinkedIn. Like, she doesn't just like everything, and the stuff that Cate likes always comes in my feed, and I love that. So I feel like every single time there's something genuinely interesting in my feed, I'm just like, where did this come from? I don't know this person. And it's like, oh, Cate liked this. And I was like, oh, okay. So Cate's finding the good shit out there. And if you're looking to raise, hit up Market Chemistry. They'll get the shit done for you. So, but as always, on my side, I'm always going to shamelessly plug my podcast. So don't forget to like and subscribe to the show on your favorite platforms and all platforms. And as I'm going to say every single time, steal someone's phone and like and subscribe on their phones, and comment on all my YouTube videos. Only nice stuff. My ego is too fragile, so don't say mean stuff. But thank you to everyone who writes in. We love these problems. And if you have any questions that you want us to go through on the show, we'll get an expert and we'll answer your questions. So send those through to podcast@joelditrapani.com. That's going to be in the show notes because I know it's impossible to spell. And if you want to have a conversation, hit me up. I've got a booking link in my calendar too. So let's catch up and run through your business and tell me how you found out about the show and tell me what you like or don't like about the show because I'm always looking to improve. And that's it. So we're going to wrap this one up. Cate, thank you so much for coming on. I loved it. And thank you for coming to a studio. It was really fun. I loved having you on this week.
Honored to be the first in-person episode.
Yeah. And the best in-person episode.
The bar is low.
Exactly. Well, this has been another episode of the Do As I Say podcast. We'll see you all next week.